Hi everyone and welcome to DennisDeep Cuts, the 63rd installment of this fine YouTube series. Today we're going to ask ourselves, where the fuck's the vinyl? Where's the vinyl? Let's see what happens. So thank you for all the kind words of encouragement on my last episode. It really means a lot to me. Makes me very happy that you're here on this journey. One of the premises of this YouTube show is that I'll bust out records from my record collection, I'll brag about them a little bit, and then you can look at them in awe and be like, oh man, that guy's got some good records in a record collection. Today we're going to do the opposite. I'm going to talk about records that I don't have in my collection. And the main reason being they're not released on vinyl. So we're going to do that, talk a little bit about CD versus vinyl and what happened and why some records are not released on vinyl. So let's do this. So the first band I want to talk about is X from Los Angeles. They started in 1977, and between 1980 and 1988 they put out 6 really great studio albums ranging from purely fantastic to really good. Even their late 80s more polished records, I still really enjoy them. Songwriting is great. Everything about it is pretty great. 1988, they put out a live record, and then they went on a hiatus for a bunch of years. And in 1993, they regrouped and put out the record Jesus. That did fairly well. They had some radio play on it, and people kind of liked it. But that record's never been released on vinyl. CD only. It took them another 27 years to release their next album, Alphabet Land, in 2020. And then this year, they released their final album, Smoke and Fiction, and they announced that they're breaking up. And I think Smoke and Fiction is a fantastic record, and it's a really, really good send-off. So I have all the records on vinyl. One of the records I don't have, and that's, of course, Jesus. And I'm also going to clarify, there's maybe 1 or 2 live records with X that I don't have because they're also CD only released. But I am talking in this episode about studio albums only, not live records. So there we have that clarified. So one of the things that happened in the 90s is, of course, that the record industry found this new media, the CD. They realized that they could produce CDs much cheaper than vinyl, and that they could sell it even a bit more expensive because of the promise of superior sound quality and indestructibility. It also helped a lot of indie labels and DIY labels to start up because it was cheaper to produce, and it's not as bulky as vinyl if you're going to have your own little label. So we're going to talk about one of those labels now. One of the first hardcore records I bought was Suicidal Tendencies, Join the Army. Suicidal Tendencies, of course, Venice Beach, California. I've talked about them on previous episodes. They had a pretty great run from the first record, I would say, until Light Camera Revolution. They're almost untouchable. Art of Rebellion is fine. Suicide for Life is fine. They're quite popular at this time, but they decided to take a break, and Mike Muir focused on Infectious Grooves, of all things. In 1999, they got back together with a sort of a new lineup, and they released the CD-only Freedom. And then in 2000, they released a record called Free Your Soul and Save Your Mind. They also released a record called like Suicidal Family with like a bunch of re-recordings of early songs and No Mercy songs. And they did this on their own label, Suicidal Records, because I assume that maybe the major labels wasn't excited anymore. That type of hardcore wasn't in the in. So yeah, there's at least 2 Suicidal Tendencies records that I don't have because they were released on CD only. Then it took them another 13 years to release their first vinyl record in a very, very long time, called 13, and then the last couple records obviously released on vinyl. So yeah, Suicidal Tendencies. Make sure those 99 and 2000 records get released on vinyl post haste, please. Now I'm going to talk about something completely different. I'm going to talk about a record as massive, sold millions. Not necessarily a record that I would pounce on to buy, but it's remarkable that it's never been released on vinyl. I am, of course, talking about 1997's Tub Thumper with Chumbawamba. You all know the song. I Get Knocked Down became like a part of pop culture canon. It's referenced in movies and TV shows, and everybody knows that song, and it became this massive hit, and Chumbawamba sold millions and millions and millions of copies of that CD. Never ever been released on vinyl. Chumbawamba, of course, started as a bunch of squat punks in Leeds in the early 80s. Put out a bunch of tapes, live cassettes. They were abrasive punk rock revolutionaries. In the 80s, they got signed to a record label called One Little Indian, which was run by one of the guys from Flux of Pink Indians. Also the label that brought us Sugar Cubes and Björk. And their abrasive punk rock became more agate pop and like artsy, performance driven. And they caught the attention of the record label. And then they put out Tub Thumper in 1997. And things were never the same again. Everything up until then is released on vinyl. So yeah, it's kind of crazy that a record this big has never gotten the vinyl treatment. A couple of years back, my good buddy Iggy was part of a crowdfunding campaign to do a Chumbawamba documentary because it is one of his favorite bands. And he sent me a link to the documentary that came out in 2021 called I Get Knocked Down. And if you ever get a chance to see it, it's a must-see. It's such a cool documentary about like being this punk rocker with all these ideas and ideology and growing old and maybe to some certain extent irrelevant in pop culture. And especially it's interesting to see because Chumbawamba was a massive band for a hot minute. I can't recommend the documentary enough, and some of the early Chumbawamba stuff is not at all like Tub Thumper, but it is remarkable that this record never ever got a vinyl release. So when Refuse broke up in 1998, the first time, we're still a band for at least a year plus. One of the things that we've been working on was that we were working on a follow-up record to Shape of Punk to Come. And the idea was we weren't really getting along and we weren't on the same page musically. So one of the things that we tried to do to combat that was like, let's put out a record where we all get 15 minutes of music and then we'll do 15 minutes of Refused music. And we just started working on that when we broke up in 1998. I went home and started the International Noise Conspiracy, and David, Chris, and John went home and started a project called Text. And they took some of that early like stuff that we were working on for the next Refuse record and molded it into something completely wild, insane, and avant-garde, pretentious nonsense. They started a record label called Demon Box to put out corporate records, and it was released on Buddyhead in the States. But it's only released on CD, and it's kind of hard to find. I think it's a record that deserves the vinyl treatment because it is a little bit of like an offshoot of the Refused history, so I would love to see this. I mean, it's an insane record. It's bombastic and pretentious and weird and sort of insane, but like in all the right ways. Text then became like this, almost like a performance collective where the record is pretty cool and it sounds actually pretty awesome. And then it became like one guy like mixing a chocolate milkshake wrapped in toilet paper, and that was like their show. So, you know, it was one of those things, but I would love to see the Text record released on vinyl. So one of the best 7-inches, hardcore 7-inches of all time is of course the Inside Out 7-inch. On Revelation Records from 1990. Inside Out is, of course, Sack from Rage Against the Machine, the band before Rage Against the Machine. And then you look at me and say, well, that is released on vinyl. But the people in the know will know exactly what I'm going to say next. This was released as a 4-song 7-inch, flawless. And it was also released as a 6-song CD EP with a bonus track, Sacrifice and Redemption. Those 2 tracks have never been released on vinyl, which is really, really upsetting. Revelation Records, you need to take responsibility for this and put it out maybe as a 12-inch with all 6 songs, maybe some live stuff or some demos, because I know Inside Out was working on new music when they broke up and Zach joined Rage Against the Machine. So please, please let me have Sacrifice and Redemption on vinyl. Please make it happen. So this next one's going to be a proper deep cut for everyone out there. In the 90s, I had a record label together with my friend Jose called Desperate Fight Records. We put out CDs with straight edge hardcore bands from Umeå, which is a niche if you ever saw one. Luckily enough, a lot of those records are being re-released on vinyl because there are nerds out there that make that happen. Every time it makes me super excited and super glad to see that they're getting the vinyl treatment. We shared office with an indie pop label called Nons Records, or North or No South Records. They put out some really cool indie rock bands like Comida and Ray Wonder. Check out one of their videos on YouTube. There's a pretty heavy Refused cameo in it, and some other really cool stuff. And one of the things they released 2 solo records with the singer of a local band called Blythe. Blythe was a really good shoegaze indie rock band from Umeå that Refused actually took on tour, 95 or 97, I can't really remember. They got signed to an American label. The American label fucked them over and they broke up, and the singer put out 2 solo records in 97 and in 98. And in 98, he put out a record called Hold It Dear, Your Career. And it's a record that me and David's been obsessed about since it came out in 1998. It's a small record, mostly just guitar and vocals, but it's beautiful. And I think it's one of the best records to ever be released in Umeå. After this record, the singer Emil quit music and he became an entertainment lawyer because he wanted to help bands to not get fucked over by the industry. I'm sure this is a record that maybe 20 people will be excited about a repressing of on vinyl, but I would be one of those people. I think it's on streaming, so go out and find it and let me know in the comments below if you think this is a cool record, because I love it. I've been obsessed with it for the past 25 years. Hold It Dear, Your Career with War J Little, or maybe just War J. I don't know what the moniker was on that record. But yes, a fantastic record. When you collect records, there are other nerds out there that collect records, and then sometimes someone said, have you heard of this record? Have you heard of this record? That's kind of like, you know, the whole deal of the record collecting community. A while back, a friend of mine sent me a link to a record and said, oh, you should check this out. It's a really good record. And I really enjoyed it. And I went on Discogs and I'm like, I'm going to find this. And it was not released on vinyl. It made me really bummed. I'm talking about a band called Shack. They started in Liverpool in the late 80s. Half the band used to be in indie rock band Pale Fountains. They're really good. And they put out 2 records, one in 1988 and one in 1992. They both have vinyl releases, but the 1992 one, super hard to find, very, very expensive. They broke up for a little bit, got back together in 1999 and put out the record HMS Fable. It's a really, really, really good indie rock record of the late 90s that definitely deserves a vinyl re-release, and one of those records that if someone did it, I'd pay good money to get the record. I also think that the second record deserves a vinyl reissue as well because it's super expensive. So yeah, Shack, a good English, British indie rock that deserves some love on the vinyl. So one of the things that people that are not collecting records have a hard time understanding is that if you love an artist, you want every record they ever put out, if you love them. And it doesn't matter if the records are not that great, or sometimes, you know, artist goes off to the deep end, but I love those records. I love the swing and miss albums. I'm wildly fascinated by failures. But as a record collector, you want every record. You want to collect them all. And a big part of why I'm doing this list is because there are gaps in my record collection that I would love to fill out. And it is difficult when one of your favorite artists has a whole slew of records that are not released on vinyl. I'm of course talking about Iggy Pop. Iggy Pop, we don't need to talk about him that much, but his catalog is a bit spotty. Some stuff is fantastic, some stuff is pretty good, and some stuff is like, I don't know what's going on. But he is one of my favorite artists. I've seen him live 20 plus times. And I want all of his records on vinyl. In 1995, he put out Naughty Little Doggy on vinyl, mostly CD, but also vinyl. And then it took him 4 years to put out another record, but in the next 6 years, he put out 3 albums, CD only. Avenue B from 1999, Beat 'em Up from 2001, and Skull Ring from 2003. Vinyl releases only. I know Skull Ring, there is a vinyl promo of it. 4 people had it on Discogs, so that doesn't really count. And then in 2009, he put out a record called Preliminaries, which also only released on CD. So there's 4 Iggy Pop records that I don't own because they're only on CD. It's super frustrating. And yeah, maybe they're not the best Iggy Pop records, but they're still Iggy Pop records. And I mean, Skull Ring, it's a bit weird. He's doing songs with Sum 41 and Green Day. It's a bit strange, but he also does songs with the newly reformed Stooges and Peaches. And I would love that on vinyl. So Iggy, get your shit together, put these records out on vinyl. Speaking about swing and a miss records, we're going to talk about a record now that's so not released on vinyl. It's not released at all. In the early 90s, hardcore ventured into post-hardcore with fantastic bands like Quicksand, Orange 9mm, one of my favorite bands, of course, Into Another. Into Another was the singer from Underdog and the drummer from Youth of Today and Bold, together with a bass player from Whiplash, doing weird alternative rock music, basically. They put out 2 records on Revelation, and then in 1995 they put out their major label debut, Seamless, on Hollywood Records. And after that they started working on their follow-up entitled Soul Control. And instead of like the heavy alternative rock that they were doing, they started experimenting with electronic elements and so on and so forth. Tensions within the band and the record label not being terribly excited about it. The band broke up, of course. And the record remained kind of unfinished, but it's finished enough. The singer actually finished up a lot of it, and you can actually find copies of it online. And it is a big swing and a miss record, but I think it's cool enough that someone should grant it a proper release, and preferably on vinyl. That would be fantastic. Let's finish up with one of my favorite bands of all time. And when you have a favorite band of all time, and there's at least 3 of their records that you can't find on vinyl, quite frustrating. I am talking about Voivod from Canada. Talked about them plenty of times before, but the original lineup had a pretty good run from the first record, Warm Pain, up until 1993's underrated Out the Limits. I love Out the Limits. It's such a great record. Then the singer and bass player left the band, and the drummer and guitar player, Away and Piggy, continued on with a new guy that played bass and sang. And they put out 2 records, Negatron in 1995 and Phobos in 1997. There's also a live record with that lineup. And they are not released on vinyl. But you said there is a vinyl like compilation with the best of from those 2 records, which is okay, but I want those 2 records separately as they were. I think it's pretty great. I think Voivod, I mean, they're always great, even though when they're not as popular, they're still great. The guy that played bass and sang, quit the band, and the original singer returned, and they got a new bass player, Jason Newsted. He just left Metallica, and in 2003 they recorded the self-titled record Voivod, only released on CD. So there's at least 3 studio albums with Voivod that's never been really released on vinyl. There's also a live record or 2, and I think someone needs to do something about that. I mean, it is kind of wild that a record with Jason Newsted, fresh off of Metallica, has not seen a vinyl release. It's insane. And there you have it, 10 artists that needs to get their shit together and re-release these records on vinyl. Maybe we'll do a follow-up in a couple of years and see if any of these records ever got released on vinyl. What's your favorite record that never saw a vinyl release? Let me know in the comments below, and thank you for watching. Until next time, stay wild, my friends. Bye-bye.